Welcome to the Float Podcast, an entrepreneurial journey. My name is Coffin Brown, once a wide-eyed hippie traveling the world in my 20s, trying to figure out what my pursuit of happiness is. After visiting over 300 locations and installing over 400 float pods, I have finally found my happiness. How'd you get into the float industry?
Well, I was in Las Vegas, Nevada in 2006, and I ran into Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan was shooting one of the Fear Factor shows, and he found out that I was in the hot tub business and I knew a lot about circulating water, and he said, I'm telling you, you gotta get into the float business. So I was intrigued, and so he hooked me up with some people, and I met some really nice people on the West Coast, and we started producing float tanks at a pretty heavy clip. And so we've got quite a few products out in the field right now. And to this day, we continue to be, I think, the largest manufacturer of flotation equipment in the world.
Do you float currently or no?
I love floating. Now, I float tandem, and a lot of people don't think about it like that, but floating tandem allows me to make a connection with my fiance, and it allows us to be able to share an experience. And anybody that floats knows that you end up with a really cool spring in your step after you float.
Oh, yeah.
And if you have that common experience with someone that you float with, then it reinforces your relationship as well as your own personal health.
I never actually used it myself for that, but interesting to know that. How long did you guys float for?
For an hour. And an hour is plenty, because when you've got all kinds of things in your life going on, it's hard to get that extra half an hour out.
What about the difference between the pod and the pool and the tank? What do you prefer yourself?
Well, you know that a pod, when you try and float tandem, is really tight, and so it's not going to work as well for us. The pod is more of a traditional float experience, so I really feel like I know how that works, and so I'm trying to explore now the people that wouldn't necessarily choose the pod because of claustrophobia or because of their interest in floating tandem. So, you know, when you're first into a business, you would try and figure out how you really handle the primary product, and then after you've really perfected the primary product, you try and figure out ancillary markets and figure out additional opportunities. So that's why I'm really pushing right now, trying to do the open floats and the float rooms. And so the primary engineering flaw, of course, of float cabins and of float rooms is that your tummy is colder than your rear end. And so creating the infrared spectrum and putting the amount of energy in the ceiling that allows a person to not be able to tell that there's a heater above them, but for their abdomen and their rear end to be the same temperature is an art. And so we're perfecting that.
What's the difference between a customer and a client for you?
Well, client is anticipating trying to help others, and that's a calling of mine, to teach people enough about the product to be able to go into the float business and know what service they're conveying and be able to try and bring them up in a level of enthusiasm about helping people that I have, because having it be a calling makes this vocation, if you will, into a vacation where you're really helping people and you're getting a lot more out of it than actually your customers are. But when you get down to a customer is the person that's going to be floating and is trying to figure out how to relax. A person is trying to figure out what they're getting from a float tank, because you really get a sense of disappointment when you hear a person say, yeah, I tried floating and I really didn't get anything out of it. And that's because they didn't know what to expect from it, and that's because they didn't know how to engage the experience appropriately. So I need for a person to know that you need to count your breaths when you're in the tank to allow yourself to achieve a relaxation that you really aren't good at achieving. And then I need for you to be able to recognize that the shower before is cleaning oils off of your abdomen and your extremities so that you can absorb more of the magnesium sulfate so you can get more out of it, the biochemical side of it. And so if people don't know how to present the product to themselves, they cannot get anywhere near as much benefit from it. We need to teach the customer how to benefit from it. We need to figure out how to make the people that are going into the float business able to get the enthusiasm that it takes to get up and running and stay in business.
Whether it's a float tank, float pool, or a float pod, we want the best for our clients. I appreciate you taking the time to answer those questions.